All right, so welcome everyone to HOMT 614, Hospitality and Tourism Strategy. My name is Dr. Sheena Boateng, and I'll be your lecturer for the course. Now, there are several sessions we will be having throughout this course, and today is session 1. And in today's session, we will be looking at two main topics. First, we will look at an introduction to hospitality and tourism strategy, and then we will look at tourism and hospitality post-COVID. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. And for today's session, there are 3 main learning outcomes. The first one is to be able to understand the nature of tourism and its forms and components, because it is with this understanding that we will be able to understand the levels at which we can strategize and how to obtain the best results based on the strategies we formulate. And then the second one is to be able to appreciate the characteristics of hospitality and tourism services. Hospitality and tourism, like we discussed a few moments ago, are a unique industry that has unique characteristics which determine how businesses are run in that sector. And therefore, with an appreciation of the characteristics of these businesses and what they offer by way of services, you can be able to see how these services differ or vary from each other. And once again, this will help you as you strategize towards developing business ideas and moving the business forward in this particular sector. Third, we will talk about appreciating the impact of COVID-19 on the hospitality and tourism sector and its implications for strategy. Because as I mentioned, COVID-19 has ravaged the industry. However, industry analysts indicate that it's on the path towards recovery. However, it will take some time and a lot of effort to get to full recovery levels. And these full recovery levels will require strategic thinking leaders and managers in the industry to take action in perspective based on the situation in the industry and what they can do to be able to achieve good results, right, for this recovery process that we are talking about. So these are the general learning outcomes that we hope to achieve by the end of the session. So on that note, let's get into the lecture. We'll start with an introduction to hospitality and tourism strategy by first defining tourism. So tourism is defined by the United Nations World Tourism Organization as people traveling to and staying in places outside their usual environment for not more than 1 consecutive year for leisure, business, and other purposes. So if you travel outside your usual environment and say you go to a whole other town or a whole other region and you stay for longer than 1 year, it does not qualify to be called tourism. This, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, Doc.
Good. So as long as you are leaving your usual environment and you are staying for less than a year, it can be referred to as tourism. Now, with that understanding, what are the components of tourism? So tourism encompasses multiple aspects, right? Which range from taking care of guests, because once you leave your usual environment and you go to another environment, you are essentially a guest in that environment because that's not where you live. So tourism encompasses taking care of guests, right? And their needs. And it also includes the creation of events. Because once you leave your usual environment, you go into this new environment seeking new experiences and with various motives with which people embark on tourism. Have you learned about the motives why people go to tourist destinations? Have you learned it in any of the courses you've taken so far?
Oh, sorry.
Have you learned about the motives why people leave their usual environment to go to other places? Ruth, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Doc.
Okay, so what are some of these motives?
Some for leisure.
Good.
Some for health.
Good.
Reasons, yes.
Good. So depending on the objective for which the person leaves their usual environment to another environment, a certain type of tourism is classified, which we will go into very soon. However, once the person leaves their usual environment to this new environment, they are looking for some kind of new experience. And these experiences may not be pre-existing in the environment that they are in. Hence the need for the creation of events. Because you need to create events that will create these experiences that the people are looking to have by leaving their usual environment to go to this new environment that we are talking about. So you remember in events management, you were made to design and create your own events. You remember?
Yes, please.
Good. I remember Mercedes did something for the expatriates returning home.
Yeah. That referral piece is it goes to those who did events. Some of us, we didn't do that. So, I mean, if you could quickly give us a flashback.
Good. So, Mercedes, tell Kwame about the event you designed and who you designed it for.
Okay, so I designed an event for, should I say, those in the diaspora. And it was more of like, for lack of better word, carnival, or something that would showcase the rich culture of Ghana. So for those who have lived outside for a long time, and then those who are also just visiting, let's say those outside who are visiting, and then let's say Ghanaians who have been outside for a long time, and then they want to come back home maybe for the Christmas holidays, and yeah, for them to have fun. So basically, that's the nutshell, yeah.
Great, thank you, Mercedes. Kwame, did you get that?
Absolutely.
Good. So in the context of what I'm saying, these people are coming from the diaspora and they are coming back to their roots. So they are looking to get some kind of experience of culture, some kind of experience of the new environments they are in and how the people there live like. So this event was designed by Mercedes and created to be able to give them that experience that they are looking for. Hence, we are saying tourism encompasses the creation of events and plans for guests' amusement, because they are looking for this experience, and this experience has to be delivered to them in order to get them to be repeat visitors to this particular destination or hospitality institution, be it a hotel, right? Or some kind of resort or other institution within the tourism hospitality sector, right? So tourism includes these in addition to traveling for pleasure, which takes us back to the events, right? And the amusement. And it's also about the theory and practice of touring, because some events are organized and built around touring various destinations that have certain significance in that particular context that the tourists find themselves in, right? However, tourism also involves the business of attracting these people. Hence, the various actors and intermediaries in the sector, including the travel agencies, the travel agents, the destination management organizations, among others. And it also includes accommodating people, which is where Kwame's business comes in. So the 5-star hotels, the 4-star hotels, the budget hotels, right? And accommodation involves bed and food, right? And then it's also about entertaining, which is sometimes handled by the events managers who design the events, or some of these accommodating institutions like the hotels, who organize their own independent events to be able to ensure that their people are entertained, right? And some are also solely into the business of operating these tours that we are talking about that involve touring and moving from place to place to give tourists a feel of the environment that they find themselves in. So based on all that we have discussed, you realize that tourism is effectively supported by hospitality and events management. Hence, we are saying the three go hand in hand and they intersect and influence each other, because without one, the other cannot function. Am I making sense?
Yes, please.
So tourism will not be what it is without the hospitality sector and without the events management sector, because a tourist can travel from one place to the other. But then once they get there, where will they stay? What will they eat? How will they move around from place to place? How will they experience the new environments they found themselves in? And how will they be entertained to be able to achieve the motives that they came there with, be it relaxation, right? Or learning or experiencing a particular kind of culture. It is the interplay between tourism, hospitality, and event management that creates this all-encompassing value that the customer is expecting to get. And the customer in this case being the tourist. So generally, these are the basic components of tourism, which when you are strategizing as a manager of an institution in the sector, you need to consider. Because if you are the manager of, say, a hotel, which is offering one service in this particular sector, you should know that your activities are affected by both. Your activities will be affected by tourism, being the movement of people from one place to the other. And your activities will also be affected by events management. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
but I have a
please.
reservation.
Okay, go
I have a
ahead.
reservation, if you will. If you look at our sub-region, especially Ghana, and the kind of tourism we have, you will realize that, for instance, when you take Accra, okay, if someone wants to possibly or someone wants to have something to do with Accra with regards to tourism, the person will only be looking probably at the hospitality aspect. The event will only be targeted at a particular thing. So, for instance, I come to Accra from let's say Kenya, and I say I'm coming on holidays, but I want to be in Accra. I don't want to go outside Accra.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to Accra, you say, where do I tour? If you ask anybody, where are the tourist sites in Accra? Honestly, it's just somebody who is well vested, deeply in the field, who will recommend a place to you. So it will be maybe a social event which might not be of interest to the tourists.
Are you sure?
So please.
Are you sure?
Because
when we say touring, the practice of touring is not just about visiting actual designated tourist destinations. You know that, right?
Which is why I'm saying that. So if I will have an example, for instance, in Accra, that's why the location is Accra. And when I mentioned, I suggested a social event. If someone wants to stay in Accra and have a tour, where will the person go? Where will the person go?
So many places.
Of interest.
Of interest. That is why you are in this class. So when you are strategizing, right, you know there are different kinds of tourists.
Sure.
With different motives. Who come here for different kinds of tourism. You know that, right?
Very well.
Good. So a lot of them like to be in Accra because there are so many kinds of tourism in Accra. So many types of tourism that can be experienced in Accra. There are certain types of tourism you can't experience in Accra, granted. But there are so many different other kinds of tourism you can experience in Accra. For instance, have you heard of culinary tourism?
No.
Okay, all right. So we are jumping the gun. When we get there, then I'll explain to you. I'm going to explain to you the different types of tourism, the key types of tourism. Even under those, there are sub ones. Have you heard of, excuse me to use the word, sex tourism?
Yes, please.
Good. That's one of the main reasons why a lot of the white men are attracted to Accra. So depending on the tourist you are dealing with and the kind of tourism they are here for, your strategy will be different. So you realize that there are hotels in Accra that, depending on the kind of tourists they are dealing with and the tourism they are here for, tend to organize tours for occupants of their hotel to different regions. You know about that?
Yeah.
And they are responsible for taking care of them, organizing their food and board, transportation, everything, taking them there, making sure they get through their tours, experience the whole place, bring them back safely, and then put them back in the same accommodation they took them from. That is why this class is so important. Are you with me, Kwame?
Very much so.
Good. So this class is supposed to help you to change the mindset you have that there's nothing in Accra. Because as a manager, you can create something even if there's nothing. And also as a manager, as we will learn very soon in the subsequent session in terms of environmental analysis, the micro environments, the macro environments, the operational context, human resource context, you realize that you yourself as a manager also need to do some digging. There's a whole concept called Accra by night. Have you heard it before?
I have.
Good. And you know how that concept came about?
No.
Okay. So Accra by night came about as a result of the fact that during the daytime in Accra, it looks like everybody is all busy about work. But once it's after hours, that's when nightlife booms. That's when activities boom. That's when all of a sudden there are fun events and activities happening all over the place in pockets. And these are all things that people actually come to Accra to experience. So Kwame, do you understand where I'm coming from?
I am.
Good. So as a manager, you need to be really, really cognizant of the context you're operating in and what is happening within that context. Otherwise, you will miss out on a lot of opportunities because there's a lot that happens in Accra. I remember there was this small magazine they used to produce in Accra called Cheers. Have you seen it before?
Pardon? Come again?
There was a small magazine. It was called Cheers, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they used to try to catalog events that are going to be happening at night in Accra. But it was for free. I think at some point they ran out of funding and they stopped. But I was so happy when I saw that publication because I thought it was going to make people become excited about all the various things they can do in Accra alone. So Kwame, I'm happy you are in this course because it will open up your mind to so many possibilities, even though you think Accra is a small place. By the time we finish, you will realize that the possibilities within this small location we are even in are limitless. Is that okay?
Very well.
Good. So let's proceed. We can agree to disagree. So hold on, as we go along, as we go along, if you have other issues you want to raise, just feel free to do so and then we will discuss. Is that okay? But before then, does anyone else in the class have something they want to share with regard to this discussion we are having? Anyone? Mercedes? Ruth?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Okay. So moving on from the component of tourism, let's talk about the different forms of tourism. So again, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, there are two main kinds of tourism. We have domestic tourism and international tourism. Domestic tourism comprises the activities of a resident visitor within their own country of reference, right? Making a domestic trip. So if we are in the same country and we are moving from place to place within our country, it's referred to as domestic tourism. So if I travel from Accra to Kumasi, I travel from Accra to Tamale, it's domestic tourism. And this constitutes about 80% of tourism activity, meaning people moving around within their domestic countries. Then international tourism is the movement outside of the country. However, it's in two forms. We have outbound and inbound international tourism. For outbound tourism, it consists of the activities of a resident visitor outside their country of reference, right? And then inbound tourism encompasses the activities of a non-resident visitor within a country on an inward trip. So if we are here and we leave Ghana and we go to a place like the UK or Ireland or Scotland, we are engaging in outbound tourism. Whereas if we are here and people come from Ireland and Scotland and the UK to Ghana, we are experiencing inbound tourism because they are not residents, but they are coming into our country. Please, I hope you understand.
Yes, please.
Yes, Doc.
So these are the two main types of tourism. Therefore, as a manager in the hospitality and tourism sector, your focus should not only be on international tourists. You should also focus on domestic tourists, given that domestic tourism constitutes about 80% of tourism activity. And that's one main problem with the Ghanaian tourism and hospitality sector. We tend to focus a lot on international tourists. True or false?
Very true.
Yeah.
It's a perception.
It's a perception. Are you sure?
Yes.
Are you sure? Where are your facts? The focus is largely on international tourism and not on domestic tourism, right? But the Ghana Tourism Authority is making strides in terms of encouraging more domestic tourism. They've done their best to show. Yes, Kwame, go ahead.
I think that the pandemic has gradually shown that we don't need international tourists to be able to thrive in our industry, and so largely the local people are trying very hard.
Exactly.
Post COVID, we have seen few local people who are organizing events that it's geared towards local tourism. I mean, week after week. For instance, on Monday, this very Monday, the holiday, you will see a lot of people visiting sites, trying to practice all forms of. And so COVID has brought out a lot for the ordinary person in tourism to think and do something good.
Yeah. So that's basically it, right? So in terms of strategy, Kwame has pointed us in the direction we are going to be heading in by the end of this lecture. That domestic tourism is now becoming a key point of focus for strategists in this industry, because international tourism currently is not where it's at. So thank you, Kwame, for that submission, right? So that is it for the forms of tourism. And now that we are familiar with the forms of tourism, let's look at some popular types of tourism, right? So be it domestic or international, tourists usually go to a particular destination for certain reasons, and that determines the type of tourism that they are there to engage in, right? So let's look at some of the popular ones. The first one is business tourism, which currently is causing a ruckus in the industry, especially for the airline industry. Now, when we talk about business tourism, it's where individuals are still working, right, and are being paid, but they are doing the work that they are being paid to do away from their workplace and their usual home environment. So even though the person is traveling out, say domestically to another region or internationally to another country, they are doing so for the purposes of business or work, right? So primary business tourism activities may include meetings, attending conferences, or attending exhibitions, right? And compared to the regular tourism that we know, where we have individual consumers traveling for leisure and stuff, business tourism involves a smaller section of the population. However, that smaller section of the population tends to be a high value segment. And that is why a number of sectors within the hospitality and tourism sector are struggling, because business tourism has been down since COVID came upon us. The airline industry usually relies on the high fares they charge from the business class and the first class to offset the costs that they incur from the economy class. So when COVID hit and a lot of travel went down, and currently, even though traveling is back up, a lot of business travel is not being done. And because of that, the airline industry is still struggling, such that those who do not have enough capital or resources to be able to offset these costs that were hitherto offset with the high level of business and first class travel, have decided to hold on or stagger their entry back into the sector, into full operation, because of the reduced level of business tourism, right? So business tourism, even though it is not as popular as regular tourism, is a very important type of tourism, which yields high levels of revenue for actors or institutions within the hospitality and tourism sector. So for people like Kwame, business tourism will generally generate more margins than regular tourism. Kwame, would you agree?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Please clarify. Yeah.
I was going to say that with regards to the kind of system and the targeted kind of business we run.
Yeah.
I think that it will go for us.
Yeah. So that is why business tourism is being discussed as the first popular type of tourism, because it's a favorite for a lot of institutions within the hospitality and tourism sector, right? Then we can also talk about ecotourism, which is currently becoming very popular among a lot of Ghanaians. So ecotourism is basically a form of tourism that involves visiting fragile, pristine, and relatively undisturbed natural areas. So the Boti Falls, the monkey sanctuaries, the Paga crocodile pond, these can all be classified as part of ecotourism, right? And it typically involves travel to destinations where the flora and fauna and cultural heritage are the primary attraction. So like I said, you go to the monkey sanctuary, I think, is it in Sunyani or something like that? I don't know exactly where it is, but you go to the monkey sanctuary because you want to go and experience the monkeys and how they live. You go to the Paga crocodile pond because you want to experience the crocodiles in their natural environment, perhaps be able to pet one, and then if you are lucky, sit on one and take a picture. These are all examples of ecotourism, where you go to actually experience these natural phenomena, right? And the purpose generally is to educate travelers and to provide funds for ecological conservation. So you realize that most of the funds that are generated from this kind of tourism are put back into the communities where these sanctuaries or natural areas are found, to help develop the community and also boost conservation efforts of these natural areas, right? So ecotourism is another key kind of tourism that is slowly gaining a lot of popularity, especially with the onset of COVID. In other parts of the world, we have seen people who have actually migrated from cities and urban areas to live in rural areas, just to experience more of a natural environment that will give them the fresh air and the serenity that in their mind will protect them from being exposed consistently and continuously to the virus that we are dealing with during the pandemic. So ecotourism is another kind of tourism that is slowly gaining popularity, especially in Ghana. Then we can also talk about dark tourism, which was very popular pre-COVID, and I'm sure will still be popular after COVID. So dark tourism, also called black tourism or grief tourism, is defined as tourism that involves traveling to places that are historically associated with death and tragedy. So the African Americans who make the trip to Ghana to be able to go and see the Cape Coast Castle and the Elmina Castle and the slave dungeons and where the slaves were passed into the waiting slave ships are engaging in what we refer to as dark tourism. Now, more recently, it was suggested that the concept should also include reasons why tourists visit the particular site, right? And not just the attributes of the site alone. So dark tourism could also be about someone visiting a particular destination that perhaps did not experience, that perhaps is not marked by tragedy, However, the person has some kind of personal grief or sentiment attached to that place, and therefore likes to go there to be able to reminisce, right? And all these are also classified under dark tourism. So such a person who visits these sites that have some kind of semblances of grief or death or tragedy is referred to as a dark tourist, right? And like the Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Castle that I'm talking about, which are popular dark tourism sites, they are attractions that are referred to as dark locations with historical value. Because like I said, they mark the location where slaves were previously kept in dungeons before they were shipped off in waiting slave ships to the New World, into slavery, right? So that in a nutshell is dark tourism. Another type of tourism we can talk about is extreme tourism. And this is a niche in the tourism industry that involves people traveling to dangerous places like mountains and caves and canyons and participating in dangerous events, right? So extreme tourism overlaps with extreme sport because people usually go to these dangerous places to be able to engage in certain sporting activities that will give them what we refer to as an adrenaline rush. So until a few years ago, extreme tourism was not popular in Ghana. Until a pivotal event that happened that introduced extreme tourism to Ghana. Who remembers that event that introduced extreme tourism to Ghana?
Is it the Kwewu Easter Fest?
Good.
Paragliding.
Good. So the paragliding was what brought about that phenomenon of extreme tourism in Ghana. Very good, Kwame. So currently the main extreme tourism we have in Ghana is with the Kwewu Easter and the paragliding that takes place during that period. And it attracts a lot of people from various places, both within and outside Ghana, right? So that is an example of extreme tourism. Then we can talk about educational tourism, which has been very popular since time immemorial, right? And educational tourism describes the event in which people travel across international borders to acquire intellectual services. And in Ghana here, we have educational tourism at a domestic level where we can observe students coming from different regions to particular regions just to attend a particular university or to attend a particular school to gain some kind of knowledge or wisdom that they feel they will not gain from the institutions that are present in their current region. So in educational tourism, the main focus of the tour or leisure activity includes visiting another country to learn about the culture, study tours, or to work and apply skills learned inside the classroom in a different environment. So the Ghanaian medical students who are shipped off to Cuba to go and work and gain experience can be classified as educational tourism. The Nigerian and Togolese and Ivorian students who flock to Ghana to experience our culture and learn about us and get their degrees can be classified as educational tourism. The Ghanaian students who apply to the UK and Canadian universities to be able to go and pursue all manner of qualifications are engaged in educational tourism. Likewise, the exchange students who come from those countries to Ghana to come and experience our culture and perhaps study with us for a semester or two are also engaging in what we refer to as educational tourism. Next, we can talk about culinary tourism. And this is the pursuit of unique and memorable.
Question.
Yes, Kwame, go ahead.
Very well. So what we used to call a sketching when we're in school, where does it fall? Is it an educational tourism?
It's educational tourism. You travel from Accra to, what's the name of that place? To Kakum National Park to learn about the park and the various flora and fauna there. It's educational tourism. Kwame, does that answer your question?
Yes, please.
Good. All right. So next we have culinary tourism. And this is the pursuit of unique and memorable eating and drinking experiences, both near and far. Right? So there are the people in Accra who always travel to Ebri over the weekend in the eastern region just to eat fufu and akrantie. Kwame, are you one of those? Is there anyone here who makes that trip or has made that trip before?
I used to.
You used to. So that's culinary tourism. Yeah, that's culinary tourism, right? And as well as those who travel around the world to be able to experience foods of different cultures. There are a lot of these shows on DSTV that are shown people traveling to India to experience the foods of the different cultures. That is all culinary tourism, right? And every tourist eats at least 3 times a day in any location that they find themselves on a holiday or taking a trip. So food is essentially one of the fundamental economic drivers of tourism, because whatever food they are eating, they are purchasing, be it from an established hospitality institution or from a local food establishment. So countries are making significant investments into culinary tourism development, and they are seeing results, right? With visitor spending and overnight stays rising as a result of food tourism promotion and product development. So there are certain countries that are currently very popular for their street food. Do you know that? Because the government has been investing in the street food sector. Singapore is one of those countries. The street food is more popular than the food in the restaurants. Has anyone heard of the street food in Singapore before? Yes, Ruth, go ahead.
Dawn, please, did you say the government invest in them?
Yes, some countries' governments have been investing in the culinary sector.
Oh, okay. Please, how is that done?
So they support businesses in that sector, and they encourage investment into that sector. So, so if an investor is coming to invest into the currently, for instance, look at the number of foreign fast food franchises we have in Ghana.
Okay. Yeah.
Good.
Look.
Yes, Kwame.
Just a quick one. I don't know whether you know of the Kinki Festival and the Wache Festival. Quite recently, the tourism authority has involved itself in that activity, and I think that, but for the pandemic, would have made a lot of waves in that direction.
Exactly. Good. So, Ruth, that's a typical example. Government has involved themselves in it. So that's what we mean when we say governments are investing and supporting.
Okay.
Good. Because they realize that it is a source of culinary tourism. The jollof competition, people came from Nigeria to come and compete with Ghanaians here on cooking jollof to see whose jollof tastes the best. Culinary tourism, right? So thank you, Kwame, for that submission. Ruth, I hope it's clear now.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So tourism can be built around a whole concept of food, right? Because food is an essential part of the tourist experience. Another type of tourism we can talk about is religious tourism, and this one has been with us since time immemorial. And it's also commonly referred to as faith tourism, where people travel individually or in groups for pilgrimage or missionary or leisure purposes, right? So in the time of our forefathers, the missionaries came from wherever they came from to Ghana to come and convert a lot of our people in the then Gold Coast into Christians. That can be classified as religious tourism. However, modern religious tourists are more able to visit holy cities and holy sites around the world voluntarily, just to experience the origins of their faith, right? The world's largest form of mass religious tourism we have known for some time now is the annual pilgrimage that our Muslim brothers and sisters make to Mecca for the Hajj, which is a key part of their religion, right? And that counts as religious tourism. And more recently, Christians are also engaging in religious tourism. I think the Christians here can tell us about that one.
The Holy Land, Israel.
Thank you. And they're doing it as individuals and as groups, right? Going to experience the Holy Land, like Kwame said, all the various sites where Christ gave his preaching, all the biblical sites that we have been reading about, they go to experience in Israel. So that also counts as religious tourism. Next, we can talk about medical tourism. Now, this one is not very popular because people never thought of it as tourism. So medical tourism is the travel of people to a place other than where they normally reside for the purpose of obtaining medical treatment in that country. So you realize that for some time now, women fall pregnant and they decide with their husbands and their families to go and give birth to their children in the UK or the US so that they can get citizenship. That's medical tourism. For some of them, it is because they do not believe that the Ghanaian health system is good enough to take good care of them. So they will engage in medical tourism by traveling to these other countries to have their children. Right? So traditionally, people will travel from less developed countries like ours to major medical centers in highly developed countries for medical treatment that was unavailable in their own communities. So we have a lot of our ministers and high-profile personalities in Ghana here, usually going abroad to seek medical treatment when they have certain conditions that they do not feel that the Ghanaian practitioners are up to, right? However, there's a more recent trend where people from developed countries are now coming to third world countries for medical treatments because of cost considerations. And this is very popular in the area of plastic surgery. Recently, there has been a spate of deaths involving people who travel from more developed countries to less developed countries for the purposes of engaging in plastic surgery. Has anyone read of any of those stories?
Yes, in Cote d'Ivoire, quite recently, I think in one of the dailies, the women, you know, sex tourism in Cote d'Ivoire is very prevalent, and a lot of people a lot of women come to Obingfo. I don't know whether you've heard that.
Yes,
they come
please.
to Obingfo hospital. The doctor there is noted to be somebody who is well, who is good in I mean, plastic surgery, especially with regards to, I don't know how to put it, but when it
body
comes to
sculpting.
women,
He calls himself a body sculptor.
Sculptor, yes. And I think that a lot of people have especially women in Cote d'Ivoire, have enjoyed that, and it's worked out for them.
Yeah. And then some of them have unfortunately lost their lives in the same circumstance. Right? Recently, I also Kwame, please go ahead.
Yes, whilst you mentioned that, a question: if one travels to have for instance, if the travel affects the individual negatively, do we still term it as a form of tourism?
Yes, because that was not the original intent with which the person made the trip.
Okay.
Good. So we are classifying as tourism based on the motivation with which the person made that trip.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Good. So we are observing both, and currently the developed are now moving to the third world countries for medical treatments, right? Which, like we have just established, sometimes do not go so well, right? However, it is medical tourism, and it is currently happening as we are talking, right? So that's another type of tourism that we need to be cognizant of. So based on that, as a strategist in this sector, you know that all these different types of tourism we've discussed: medical tourism, religious tourism, culinary tourism, educational tourism, extreme tourism, dark tourism, ecotourism, business tourism, among all the other myriad ones we have not discussed, present huge opportunities for you as an actor in the sector. Because let me give you a typical example. For instance, if you decide to be able to take advantage of the different kinds of tourism and develop a specific program for your hotel to benefit from each kind of tourism. So perhaps you will have a package for eco-tourists who come to lodge at your hotel, or you will have a package for dark tourists who come to lodge at your hotel. Please, am I making sense?
Yes.
Because these are all different opportunities for you to earn good revenue by designing packages around these different types of tourism, with your institution having a pivotal role to play. And sometimes, like I mentioned, it may involve partnering with other institutions and individuals in the other sectors to be able to ensure that you can present this holistic package that will be of benefit to all the players involved. Hence, the importance of knowing these different types of tourism and how you can be able to take advantage of them when it comes to strategy formulation. So now that we do know about these types, let's look at the characteristics of hospitality and tourism services. And we will discuss 10 main characteristics, starting from intangibility. Now, intangibility here refers to the fact that hospitality and tourism services cannot be easily evaluated in advance of their purchase. So much of the selling of tourism and hospitality is based on making promises. So these promises are either made through verbal or non-verbal communication. Please, does that make sense?
Yes.
So if I'm going to sleep in a hotel, I only know what I'm going to get based on perhaps the pictures I have seen that have been taken of the rooms and the premises, and perhaps a video that has been shown of the staff on call at the job, or of some few customers engaging with the staff within the premises of the hotel. However, this is not an accurate, perfect representation of the experience I'm going to have. Hence, the concept of intangibility. So in strategizing, we need to bear in mind the intangible nature of services in this sector so that we will know how to push the tangibility agenda and convince customers, who in this case are potential tourists, of the value they are going to get should they decide to patronize our services within this sector. Hence, the importance of understanding the concept of intangibility. Again, the concept of perishability, which I believe is one of the characteristics that players in the sector are very familiar with, especially those in the accommodation sector and in the culinary sector. Because tourism, unlike goods, cannot be stored for sale on a future occasion. So if you have a certain number of rooms and they are not occupied on this particular day, the revenue you would have gained from it being occupied is lost and cannot be regained ever. The food you cooked for consumption on that particular day, if no one comes into the restaurant to eat, has gone waste and cannot be sold to anyone else. Hence the concept of perishability. And this is directly linked to the seasonality of demand for services in this sector. And therefore, operating in this sector is high risk, because if you cook a certain amount of food without anticipating how many guests you are expecting, you may end up cooking all this food and it will go waste because there will not be enough guests to purchase the food for it to finish. And here, I remember in some time past, because of perishability, a lot of hotels and institutions that offer accommodation were selling timeshare. They were inviting us to all these meetings and discussions where they were trying to get us to buy into holiday destinations. And not the destination, but hotel rooms in specific destinations. I mean, have you ever been invited to one of those meetings before?
I no, but your term was what? Selling timeshare.
Yeah. So it's like they put all of you in a group and they tell you these are the number of rooms in the place. You pay in advance to have access to the place at a particular time of the year. Sure. Good. And that is directly linked to the concept of perishability. So even if you do not come and stay there, you have paid in advance.
Yeah.
Good. So they gain, even if the rooms are empty.
Yeah.
Good. And that is all directly linked to the concept of perishability. We can also talk about the concept of inseparability. Yes, Ruth, please go ahead.
Sure, please, can you take that again?
The perishability.
The concept of putting everybody in like a group and you paying, I didn't understand.
Okay, so they call it timeshare, right? So there's a hotel. Yeah, so there's a hotel. Let's call it HMT Hotel. An HMT hotel knows that between the period of January to March, their rooms are almost always empty. So they would invite a group of people and say, okay, we are asking you all to pay a flat fee to have unlimited access to these rooms during the period of January to March. Are you there? Ruth?
So Dr. Shin, we are going to pay from let's take it from January to maybe January to March. Yes.
Yes, it's a flat fee.
So you are paying for the 3 months.
It's like a club. They make it look like a club. So you are paying to retain membership of the club. So as long as you keep paying your membership dues, you have access to use the rooms during that January to March period.
At
I
any
hope
time.
I'm explaining it correctly.
Yes, but no, normally this is done during off-peak for various hotels, and the duration is always short.
Yes.
So it doesn't take a month. So probably it does 2 weeks, a week, 2 weeks. Yes.
Good. Bless, you get it now.
Yes, please.
So they are doing that because they know for sure, based on trend, that around that time the hotel is usually empty.
Okay.
So it's a way of making money because of perishability. If they don't find a way of making money on the rooms during that period, the rooms will just be empty with no occupant, and they'll be paying bills still.
Yeah.
The fact that the rooms are empty doesn't mean you are not paying your staff.
Yeah.
Good. And it's because of the characteristic of perishability. Do you understand it now?
Yes, I do. So, Doug, what if there's a situation whereby, yes, you take money from this group, and then they know that probably maybe from on the 1st to 14th, they can just use the room at any time because they paid for it.
Yeah.
But you have clients, you happen to just have clients at that point in time. What happens?
Kame, can you answer this one for us, since you're on the field?
Yes. What it is that you might have booked the place. So all these things are planned. We know very well that from January to probably March, we are off peak. So we put in place this particular system, or this particular what do I term it? What we put in place this sell timeshare thing, selling timeshare. That's when you fix this particular thing for this season. So you make sure that at any point in time, if you have a walk-in, that walk-in will not be given that booked time, so that it doesn't create an inconvenience to you, the operator.
Yeah. Ruth, you get it now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, so it's planned because it cannot interfere with their regular business.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ruth. All right. So next week, we are going to talk about inseparability. And this has to do with the fact that the products, right, in the hospitality and tourism sector are almost always consumed and produced simultaneously. So both the service provider and the customer have to be present when the service function occurs. Yes, Mercedes.
Doc, please, just a little question. I'm just wondering, the timeshare, what Kwame just discussed, is it the package? Do they pay the same as, let's say, their customers? Would they pay the package that they give to these other people, the group?
Yes.
Is it the same amount that, let's say, other guests pay, or it's at a reduced price?
Kwame, can you come in before I come in with my experience? Yeah.
Yes, please. Just like we mentioned, because this is normally organized during off-peak and the hotel wants to make or generate some revenue, you try to reduce the rate. You try to reduce, so you don't use what is on the board, what a regular walk-in will pay. No, this is a very special one. It's just for a short season or a short period. We can always also, I don't know, but if I can push this a little bit to for instance, restaurant service also.
Yeah.
You realize that when you go to some restaurants, you see that they do buffet services, and this as a reduced cost.
Yeah.
But for COVID, a lot of people or a lot of hotels or restaurants were doing it during weekends.
Yeah.
They know that that's where they can generate a lot of revenue. So it's for just a particular time, maybe from 12 o'clock to 6 p.m. They say 180 cedis for an individual. So a group comes in and pays, for instance, 2,000 cedis for 5 people.
Yeah.
And that's it for a short period.
Yeah. So in my case, they were trying to sell us something somewhere in, is it Mauritius or something like that? And they staggered the packages. So they had the basic package, a gold package, and then some platinum package or something. And the differences in the packages were based on the amenities that you had access to. It seems they had a lot of amenities on the premises. So depending on the package you pay for and you sign up to, within that 2-week period, like Kwame say, you may have access to certain amenities that someone in, say, a lower category may not have access to. So Mercedes, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, please. I have a follow-up question.
Please go ahead.
So in a scenario whereby this group, I mean, those that you reduce or you've given them the package.
Yeah.
They've booked, like I say, let's say 2 weeks. And within the 2 weeks, let's say they've booked for, let's say, a week. And then you get guests that have come and the rooms that you have left are not enough for the people. Let's say the people who are coming in, the guests, they are, let's say, a group of 20. What happens to, let's say you have rooms for 15 people, so the other 5, what happens to them? And they are bent on all of them staying in that particular hotel. What happens?
Okay. So Mercedes, like Kwame was saying, which is the essence of this course, it's all about strategy. Based on your analysis, looking at the operational records, looking at the seasons and your performance in the seasons, looking at the context, both micro and macro, what is happening, you know that at this particular period, there's no way you are going to get beyond a certain number of visitors or a number of... Yes, Mercedes, go ahead.
There can be a first time.
Yes.
Definitely.
Now, if I may
Kwame, go ahead.
One of the very important things in business or in hospitality is client retention. Now, if you have a certain agreement with a group or an individual, you need to stick to the agreement to make your future very comfortable. So, for instance, if you say that you're coming here from on the 1st to 20th and you need 20 rooms, and you show commitment with regards to our rooms, we need to make sure that we get you the rooms. When even the president comes, we'll have to excuse the president.
Yeah.
Because we have a certain commitment and we must stick to that commitment. So, I mean, you will not want to, disappoint your guests, considering the fact that you want money.
Yeah.
so consider the person you have shown commitment to.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, which means from what you are saying, you would keep the other package, as in, I'm using the group that you've given them the package. You keep them and then you would let the 20 people go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you see, once you're making this, Madam, please indulge me. Once you're doing this, you also make room for, you see, when you have a package like this, you don't give all out. So you have 20 rooms, and you know that during off-peak, you want to put in a package for, let's say, 13 people. Then the rest will be for the walk-ins. So those walk-ins, are going to go for those who come, I mean, who you don't expect. But your 13 rooms should be there for you. I mean, because you have promised the people you are coming. And you see, most of the time, this particular packages should have a certain commitment. Somebody will just not tell you, oh, I'm coming, so give me 20 rooms, and then you leave the 20 rooms. Probably it goes through an agreement, and that agreement should have financial commitments.
Yeah,
that will give you a strong edge to put in place this strategy.
Dor, can I come in, please?
Yes, Ruth, go ahead.
Okay, so Mercedes, when I was at Aqua Safari, this is what we were doing. If some people book over the phone, so you take their details, including their contacts, they do some form of payment, probably through mobile money or bank transfer. So a day before, if the person is coming in on the 15th, what happens is that if our boss sense that maybe the place is going to be busy and we are not 100% sure if those who booked for tomorrow are going to show up, you see, they don't pay 100%, they pay probably 60 or 50% of the rate. So we call them a night before or a day before. If push comes to shove, what happens is that you saying that maybe 20 people walked in, we have sister hotels around. So mostly what happens is that you talk to them, you have a talk with them, let them know that maybe they didn't book earlier, so they just walked in. So you try and arrange for the sister hotel for them, convince them that is also a nice place, blah, blah, blah. And then you get a porter to take them, or you get a driver to take them to see the place. And maybe the 10 can stay in your hotel, and then the other 5 can stay in the sister hotel.
Mercy, did you get it?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Good. So that's where we were talking about the interconnectedness of all the players in the sector.
Yeah.
Because you don't exist in isolation, you need to know the other actors and be able to form your own strategic alliances to help you get your business done, like Ruth is explaining.
Sure.
Great. You're welcome, Mercedes. And thank you, Ruth and Kwame.
We are grateful.
So we were talking about inseparability, right? So generally what we were saying is that the consumption and the production of hospitality and tourism services take place at the same time. So the provider and the customer are always present when the service function occurs, which makes it very, very difficult for the service provider to ensure the same level of quality consistently, which leads to heterogeneity and variability. So if you are providing some kind of service, like you own a hotel, you are present, your staff are present in the hotel with the hotel occupants. They are cleaning their rooms, serving them breakfast, doing their daily errands for them, offering room service. If there are any other services that are complementary that they offer in the hotel, they are offering them to the clients, and these services are being consumed at the same time. So the nature of service that the customer experiences is determined by the staff that is offering the service. That is why most of the time when a tourist or a hotel occupant has a run-in with, say, a bad waiter or waitress, or a bad receptionist, or their room is not properly cleaned, or something gets missing, it's an indictment on not just the individual, but on the services offered by the entire hotel. And these occurrences are very common in the hospitality industry, where you will have someone unhappy with the way their room was cleaned. And because of that, they brand the hotel a bad hotel to stay in, because of the inseparability of the service that is being offered and the consumption process. And because of the same inseparability, the service delivery is varied. And that is also attributable to the fact that the sector is fragmented. Different people are offering different services. So the person who offers accommodation is sometimes different from the person who offers transportation. And it's also sometimes different from the person who offers culinary services. Unless the person is living in a full service hotel where they offer food and board and transportation. So there are drivers to take you where you want to go. There's a restaurant that can serve all your food needs, and then you have your accommodation, right? However, in the absence of these full service institutions, service delivery is fragmented, which can lead to variances in delivery standards. So you realize that a tourist will come, they'll be living in a very good hotel, they'll decide to leave the hotel and go and eat outside, you'll get some kind of food poisoning or something, and then it mars the experience. But it was not the fault of where they were accommodated, because the food didn't come from there, the food came from somewhere else, which is a testament to the fragmented nature of the whole tourism and hospitality system. Hence the concept of heterogeneity and variability. We can also talk about the concept of interdependence. And this is a direct offshoot of the example that Ruth just gave to us about the sister hotel concept. And that is because there's a great deal of overlap between the constituent parts of tourism, hospitality, and events. The institutions and firms within the sector work hand in hand, side by side, and together. So as a strategist, you need to be cognizant of this interdependence and know that you are not existing in isolation, such that they are coexisting with you whether you like it or not. And as a good strategist, you can benefit from incorporating them meaningfully into your overall strategy to be able to benefit as an organization. So you realize that there may be a hotel that does not have their own transport service, but they have a partnership with a transport company that offers transportation services to occupants in their hotel, and which leads them to be able to guarantee the safety of the occupants of their hotel and to make sure that they have a good transport experience to and from destinations while they are staying in their hotel. This is a typical example of the interdependence that we just talked about. Another example is the example Ruth gave with the sister hotels taking the overflow from other hotels that are unable to accommodate all their occupants. So at the strategic level, all these three could be usefully considered together, like I just mentioned, because you want to be able to use them meaningfully as part of your strategy, so that where they can be able to contribute positively to helping you achieve your strategic objectives, you can use them in that manner, right? So in this interdependence, we are talking about all the firms in tourism, hospitality, and events, including the event management companies and organizations, the managers of the attractions, the transport companies, the hotels, the restaurants, the destination management organizations, the travel organizers, as well as the regulatory bodies, including the Ghana Tourism Authority, all of whom play a role in the successful execution of whatever strategy you have as a manager of any firm in this particular sector. So in terms of interdependence from this model, we can see that there is a core group of sectors that interact and interdepend on each other. So at the core of the sector, we have transport, which plays a pivotal role in moving the tourists from one destination to the other, be it domestically or internationally. So you can see that in the middle under transport, we have airlines, shipping lines, railways, bus and coach operators, airports, ground handlers, among others. All those who have something to do with the transport sector are in the middle because they help us to move the people from one place to the other. Then in the outskirts, we have attraction first in the green section, where we can see the theme parks, the museums, the galleries, the gardens, the heritage sites, and then other attractions too these days that form entertainment, like the nightclubs and certain beaches that have become notorious, right, for being specific attractions because of certain events that are known to occur at those places. Then we have destination organizations, and these are actual organizations that engage in the management of these destinations and all the activities that revolve around tourists visiting these destinations, including the national, regional, and local tourist offices. I remember I made a trip to Ireland some time ago. As soon as I got to the airport, there was a tourist office there. And I was advised to go there to be able to appreciate what I was about to experience as a tourist. And when I entered there, they gave me so much information. They gave me maps of the city I had entered into, bus passes to help me to be able to at least take buses in the first few hours to be able to get to my destination. They gave me a map of the various bus routes and train routes. And then they told me about the security agents who would be around and where to go to for help in case I was in trouble. And all this information I got at the local tourist office, which is directly at the airport. In Ghana, do we have a tourist office at the airport?
We do.
Which
it's at the arrival. It's at the arrival. Yeah.
Really?
The tourism authority has it there. I quite remember in 2016.
Yeah.
In 2016, when the government changed, they changed a few people there, and then had the tourism development organization. In fact, is in charge of that.
Okay. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Then they have to do a better job of publicizing themselves because they are not very popular.
I think they are not.
Now, there's national organizations. We can also talk about the tourism associations. Now, these are usually smaller associations of various institutions and organizations in the tourism sector. So I think in Ghana, there's a hoteliers association, isn't there? Kwame, there's a hoteliers association, right?
There is.
Yes, and I think there's an association for those who own the airlines, and then for other various sectors, there are associations for each of them, right? So these are all classified under destination organizations. Then we have the travel organizers. These are the tour operators, the tour agents, the tour brokers, the travel agents, the internet comparison sites where people go to compare the various trips and destinations. And currently, if I might add, the internet comparison sites are booming because of COVID. They are helping people to have a one-stop shop where they can be able to organize their trips for the best value using just these sites alone. So you can visit an internet comparison site and you can compare prices for different hotels, prices that offer complete packages, hotels that offer single packages. So you go to this site and you can be able to see, okay, this hotel is offering me food, board, transport, and all this for this amount. And this hotel is just giving me accommodation for this amount. And you can compare all these different packages and prices and make the best choice. And this includes all the individuals and institutions listed there under the umbrella term travel organizers. Then we have the events section, which has to do with event management companies, those who organize the sports events and the concerts and the performances, as well as those who organize the festivals. So in Ghana here, most of the festivals are organized in the traditional sense. So we have the traditional rulers and their people organizing these festivals. And all these are classified under events, as well as exhibitions, which are usually handled by the Ghana Trade Fair Authority, especially the exhibitions at the national level. So currently we have consumer trade shows that are being organized by the Ghana Trade Fair Authority. And then we have consumer shows, and then trade shows. So the consumer shows are for the individual consumers who just want to go and experience different artifacts and items that are being sold, as well as entertainment. And then the trade shows are for the institutional buyers and organizations to be able to experience suppliers and the goods and services that they have to offer, to be able to know the opportunities and options that they have. These are all organized under events. Then we can also talk about conferences, which are also very popular, especially in academic settings. I remember pre-COVID, most of the faculty in the business school built their holidays around academic conferences. So they would not take holidays during the year, but around the time that there was a conference, they would rather attend the conference and then continue with their holiday in the conference location. Is that how that makes sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
And all of these can be classified under events. Then we have our hospitality people. the hotels and guest houses, the villas and apartments, the timeshares, the camping, the marinas, the full service restaurants, the fast food restaurants, then the cafes and the bars. And now the hotels and guest houses and villas and apartments are having to compete with those who are doing the mobile accommodation using the campers. It's not very popular in our part of the world yet, but in other parts of the world, they are doing the campers. Kwame, you've heard about them. Those mobile homes, yes. So they have a huge park, and they provide people the opportunity to come and park their mobile homes there and then live there for a period. Or if you don't have one of your own, you can rent one from them and live in it for the period, right? So, yes, please go ahead. Kwame, can you hear me? Kwame, are you there? Oh, I think we've lost Kwame.
No, I'm here.
Okay, yes, please go ahead.
So I said in Ghana, the Bree Botanical Garden accommodates that because it's something that's new. It's not too much in the system, but we don't have, what I have seen, I mean, from a personal experience, is the tents. So we don't have the real mobile home that probably you are describing, but these are tents that few groups have organized.
Okay. That's nice. That's a welcome innovation. Because previously the botanical gardens were a bit closed off to the general public. So it's good that they are innovating with the times.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Kwame.
Grateful.
All right, so that is it for interdependence. And then we can also talk about high costs. Now, high cost is not just on the part of the institutions in the sector. High cost is also incurred on the part of the customers or the tourists. Now, the hospitality and tourism industry have relatively high fixed costs of operating the available fixed level of capacity, right? So if, for instance, you are a hotel owner, you have to put in a lot of capital and resources to be able to put up this edifice, stock it with furniture, put in air conditioning, interior decor, hire staff to be on call, set up with equipment and machinery to ensure that you can provide all the food and the drinks and all that. These are all initial costs that you incur regardless, right? And these are very high compared to the variable costs. That is why we can see the hotels doing things like timeshare during the low peak seasons. Because of this concept of high fixed costs, they have spent a lot of money to put together these buildings with so many rooms, and they cannot afford to allow them to just be there and go waste. The same on the part of the customers who come and purchase these services in the hospitality and tourism sector. Consumers spend a lot of time and money planning these holidays and trips. So usually you realize that some people's largest expenditure in a year is spent on planning a holiday. And we see this a lot with our counterparts in the West, who will work very hard throughout the whole year and then put together thousands of dollars to make a trip to an exotic destination with their families to be able to relax and let off steam. So we realize that there's high costs involved on the part of institutions and organizations in the sector, as well as the tourists who come to patronize these services. And this has important managerial implications when we are formulating strategy, especially with regard to marketing, because we have seen innovative ways in which institutions in the sector have been able to market themselves to be able to offset some of these high costs they've incurred initially. A typical example being the timeshare that we just talked about during off-peak seasons. However, on the part of the customer, how do they offset these high costs they are incurring? It is the job of the institutions that are offering services to customers in this sector to be able to market themselves in a manner that will convince consumers of the value they are going to get from the high expenditure they are putting in. So if you are selling the customer a certain image in your promotions, in your videos, in the pictures on your website, they need to be able to be commensurate to what the customer or tourist actually experiences once they get to the destination, given the high element of cost involved in getting there. And when we talk about high cost involvement, we can talk about everything from the transportation fee to get there. If they're coming internationally, they are going to go by air, which is of a high cost. When they get there, they will have to take transportation on the ground by car, either by a ride-sharing service like Uber or Bolt in Ghana here, or some of them will prefer to lease a private car to drive around. All of these have cost implications. Their accommodation, the room that they stay in, the food that they consume, right? The attractions they decide to visit. All of these have cost implications. And therefore, when strategizing as a manager, you need to take all these things into consideration. And that is with regard to high cost. Next, we can talk about seasonality, which we talked about into detail a lot this evening, regarding the seasonality of the demand for the products and services that are offered in this particular sector, right? And this seasonality often comes basically in terms of the seasons. So it's either spring, summer, winter, or fall in other parts of the world. But in our part of the world, it revolves largely around seasonality that has to do with school holidays. So lecturers cannot travel unless it is the long vacation, right? Between June and July. Students cannot travel out unless it's between June and July because they have lectures. In your case, if it was June and July, you cannot travel at all because that is when you come to school. All right, now, luckily, you do not have to come to school in June and July because you are doing the Zoom thing. So we are incorporating it somehow into the academic year because of COVID. But pre-COVID, you had to come in June and July and do a crash course and finish all your lectures and write exams. Please, are you aware of that?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Good, good. So that accounts for the seasonality as well. Then religious festivals also account for some of this seasonality. So during the Hajj period, I'm sure in Mecca, everybody pre-COVID was anticipating the influx of all these pilgrims. And if they were offering accommodation, they were preparing, they were offering food, transport. I'm sure they were taking all this into consideration when planning and strategizing for that period. We can also look at historic travel patterns, which leads a lot of the hotels to be able to plan for low peak and high peak seasons, right? And like we have identified, all of these have the implications for accommodation and the delivery of events as well as other services. So in strategizing, most of the time when it comes to seasonality, the move is for counter-seasonal strategies that will help to offset the downsides of the seasonality of the services that are offered in this sector. Now, apart from seasonality, we can also talk of ease of entry and exit. Now, in many areas of tourism and hospitality, it is relatively easy to set up in business. It's also very easy to exit from the industry. So you realize that in Ghana here, there are a lot of makeshift guest houses and small hotels in different corners. Kwame, am I right?
Very much so.
And that is because of the ease of entry and exit, right? So, and currently, because of the ride-sharing services, anybody buys a small car and they are into transportation, right? These are all semblances of the ease of entry and exit. And this is because—
It will interest you to—
Yes, please go ahead.
It will interest you to know that in this pandemic, it's those small hotels and guest houses that are making it. Those with very, they are making it. The very large ones are losing. And
could it be because they are not adhering to all these COVID protocols and they are not held to such a high standard that the larger hotels are held to?
No, there's a highly held perception that, I mean, those big ones charge in dollars and have high charges. The smaller ones, and then more so, a lot more people are now want to live in very confined areas. They don't want people to notice them. I mean,
that's
so
true.
they'll rather want to find themselves very tight.
That's very true.
Very small. Yeah.
That's very true. Thank you for that submission, Kwame. That's very, very true.
Right.
So you realize that the sector is a hub for a lot of SMEs, right? So like we have just established, like Kwame is saying, these small local small and medium institutions in this sector are the ones actually making it, right? So we have these small makeshift hotels, small makeshift restaurants and chop bars and eateries and stuff. They are the ones that are actually thriving in this period because of the ease of entry and exit, right? So that's one characteristic of the industry. And we can also talk about the impact of the industry and on society. And this is a very important characteristic because the effects of the tourism and hospitality industry are far-reaching, right? The focus of attention is usually upon the impact that it has on the destinations in which these institutions are situated, be it positive or negative, right? And depending on the kind of tourism that is being practiced or is being patronized, it can either have a positive or negative effect on the destinations in question. So a lot of literature has emerged recently which explores the range of issues relating to the impact resulting from the development of tourism, right? And terms like sustainable development and responsible tourism have emerged to be able to try and offset the negative effects of the impact of tourism and hospitality on society. So let's quickly analyze this diagram, which tries to break down the impact of tourism on society along three main strands. They look at the economic impact, the social impact, and the environmental impact, and they compare it in both positive and negative aspects. So the diagram starts from the top where we have tourist needs. And like we said, the industry is multifaceted. So there are various moving parts. And the system includes needs that tourists will expect to have satisfied, including travel, accommodation, attractions, shopping, festivals, events, and various other recreational activities. Now, to be able to satisfy these needs, they need to patronize certain industry providers, including transportation services like cars, buses, and coaches, roads, railways, airlines. To be able to gain access into a country, you need to go through the airport, right? And for accommodation, you need to live in hotel buildings, be it budget hotels or 4-star, 5-star hotels. And then the shopping centers are also there to facilitate the shopping. And then the leisure facilities are there for the recreational and entertainment activities. And then events and excursion organizers are also there to satisfy the needs for events and the visiting of attractions. Now, the impact of these can be felt along the lines of economic, social, and environmental levels. Looking at the positive aspects of the economy, we can see that visitors spend, and that will go directly towards boosting the economy, because the more visitors spend, the more the economy develops, right? And the more visitors come in and spend and patronize various services, the more employment there will be for people within the sector. At the same time, too, the more visitors we have, the more investment we will get into the sector, particularly in the area of infrastructure. Because if we have more tourists coming in and limited accommodation facilities, we will have to invest in infrastructure to support accommodation. If we had more travelers coming in and we did not have an airport big enough to process all these travelers, we will have to invest in infrastructure to expand. Hence our beautiful Kuduka International Airport Terminal 3. I don't know if they have plans of expanding or building an additional one, but if the whole airport could begin to look like that, including the domestic section, it will be something very positive for us. On the social level, the positive impacts include people being able to visit various destinations to understand different cultures and to be able to experience the lifestyles and livelihoods of these different cultures to appreciate them better. Socially, tourism also supports local services because once tourists visit the destination, they will have to patronize from local service providers. On the environmental level, we can talk about the regeneration of urban and rural areas. Some rural communities are dying because they are being forgotten. People rarely come around, people rarely visit, and because of that, there's no level of development in that community. So you realize that you go to certain communities and most of the people there are largely aged because all the youth have left the community because there's lack of work to be able to move to urban areas to look for greener pastures. However, if tourism were to be boosted in these communities, which have attractions and various locations in the form of ecotourism that can attract some kind of development, these youth will not be forced to leave those destinations. And it will lead to the regeneration of these areas because more people will move there and the economies of these different areas will thrive. Tourism also contributes to the preservation of old buildings because art and cultural tourism leads people to visit various destinations to be able to experience these old buildings, the architecture, and how life was like in the times that these buildings were put up. So we realized that because of the tourism that is engaged in the Cape Coast and Elmina Castle, those castles are very well preserved because they always get visitors coming around to try and experience the locations and whatever took place there in the past, right? Hence the concept of preservation. We can also talk about protection of countryside. We don't really have a countryside that we protect. We have our beaches, which we have been trying to protect for a very long time. However, we have largely not been very successful because the Labadi beach and other beaches are still very heavily polluted. And if anything, it is not encouraging tourism, it is rather taking away from tourism because people do not want to visit these places anymore because of the high levels of pollution that are taking place, right? So these are economic, social, and environmental impacts of tourism in the positive light. Conversely, we can talk about the negative impact of tourism. Now, economically, there's a leakage of income from local economies when people leave their traditional environments to other places to engage in tourism. That is why domestic tourism is the future, because we wouldn't want our citizens leaving Ghana with the hard-earned money from here and spending the money elsewhere in another country. We want the money to stay in the local economy so that it can help to boost the economy, rather than giving it to another country's economy and supporting their development. We would rather it stays with us. However, tourism also leads to increased inequalities because we have people coming from different walks of life, from different places to specific destinations, engaging in all manner of events, festivals, leisure, and activities. And you realize that other areas that do not get this kind of traffic are largely neglected. So that is why we were saying in terms of the positive impact that with the increased number of tourists and tourism in a particular destination, other areas can be regenerated and can develop to meet the level of the more popular cities and areas that are largely developed, thereby reducing that inequality. However, if this is not equitably done, we will definitely observe increased inequalities. In terms of social aspects, tourism sometimes disturbs the traditional way of life. There have been instances in the past where tourists have come to Ghana and they have visited certain locations and they have desecrated local culture. Places that were held sacred were infiltrated by tourists who did not know any better. We have heard of stories where tourists have visited traditional areas and actually stolen traditional artifacts, including gods, and carried them out of Ghana. Please, has anyone heard of any of those stories before? Please, has anyone heard of any such story?
Welcome, madam. Yes, dog, I have, but I'm trying to remember one or two.
Yeah.
So I can back.
Kami, have you heard of any such story?
Not that I know of, please.
Okay. All right. There are quite a number of them. Some of them go to the rural areas, and then there are certain parts or certain forests that are sacred. There are certain rivers that you're not supposed to visit on certain days. Tourists have mistakenly or knowingly visited these places, gone to the water. I've even heard of stories in Nigeria where this one was a very popular one. It was even turned into a movie. The tourists went to the village, they visited a shrine, they saw the gods, and then they paid people to help them package the gods and send them back to their country.
Okay, let me quickly say this.
Yes.
Last year, I think probably in October, I think August or October, we had a story of a Nigerian porn star who starred in a movie in one of the biggest forests in Nigeria.
Wow.
And they had moved. The story is online. Anybody can check. The name of the guy is Toby in something forest. I don't know whether any of my colleagues have heard that. And they moved the gods there. I mean, took certain artifacts in the forest, and I think the gentleman was barred from acting or something.
Yeah,
it's online. It's online if anybody has.
Yeah, that's another good example. Yeah, it amounts to a total disturbance of the traditional ways of life of the people. It's actually considered to be disrespectful, right? Yeah. And that is a direct implication of tourism, leaving your environment to go to another person's environment and disturbing it in that manner, which amounts to a negative impact. And in terms of the environment, environmentalists have been complaining about tourism and its effect on the environment for several years. Climate change activists have been against air travel for so long because of the effect of the usage of the jet fuel back and forth on the environment. Tourists have been known to go to various destinations, and because of increased tourism in certain destinations, the local flora and fauna are dying because of pollution. Right? So tourism has had a directly negative impact on the air, sea, as well as a lot of noise pollution. Places that were usually very quiet and very serene have become very noisy because of the influx of large amounts of tourists. There have also been issues of the erosion of the landscape and then damage to historic buildings, all because of increased tourism. And these tourists come in with various motives. And if these motives are not pure, they will often result in these negative impacts that we are talking about. So this diagram captures in a nutshell what we are talking about in terms of the impact of the hospitality and tourism industry on society, right? But apart from that, the industry also suffers from the effects of various external shocks. The industry is particularly prone to shocks that are beyond the control of the various managers of the institutions in the sector. And what we are experiencing now in terms of COVID is a typical example, right? Unlike internal events which can be assessed and controlled by managers, like for instance, these low peak, high peak seasons, issues of a financial nature, issues of a human resource nature, or an infrastructural nature, managers can easily assess and control for. However, external events, like the pandemic we are currently in, I remember when the volcano exploded in Iceland, there was no way anybody could have said or predicted that the volcano was going to explode at that time. Perhaps the seismologists and the people in charge in Iceland were able to predict perhaps when the volcano was going to erupt. But no one could foretell the repercussions of the volcanic ash and how long it stayed in the atmosphere on air travel at that period of time. And that's a typical example of an external shock that affected a lot of movement back and forth, right? So the industry suffers from a lot of external shocks. And currently the largest external shock that the industry may have experienced is what we are facing, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And even though the industry is recovering, the jury is still out on how well the industry is going to do post-COVID and when the industry is going to fully recover to pre-COVID times. So generally, this table summarizes all the various characteristics we are talking about and provides examples of issues that may arise with regard to each characteristic and the managerial implications of it. So for instance, in terms of intangibility, the table talks about the fact that products cannot be tested or sampled. And we mentioned that, for instance, if you are booking a hotel, you can only go off of the pictures you see on the hotel's website or the video that they have posted in their marketing, right? So the managerial implication here is that the managers must make sure that their promotion and distribution is expertly done to be able to capture the essence of the premises or whatever product it is they are selling, such that the customer will be able to experience exactly what they were promised once they finally make it to the place. To the concept of inseparability, we talked about the fact that production and consumption take place at the same time. So the staff who are involved in the production process must make sure that they deliver good service to ensure that the consumption experience is a good one or one that is perceived to be of value. In terms of perishability, we established that products in the industry cannot be stored. So based on the examples we gave, we observed that firms and institutions in the industry try to put in place measures to offset the effects of this perishability criterion that we identified. And they did so to be able to stimulate demand so that their products can be sold the way they want them to be sold at the required time, leading them to do what we discussed in terms of timeshare by selling certain slots during off-peak seasons to guarantee that they can offset the effects of some of the perishability characteristic that we talked about. Sorry. In terms of heterogeneity, we said that the products are not identical. So the managerial implication here is that we need good, well-trained staff who can be able to at least offer near identical services to every single customer, right? And also be able to know how to react in specific scenarios to ensure that regardless of the nature of the customer, a certain standard of service delivery is offered. In terms of ownership, customers use services rather than own them, right? So if you want your customers to remain loyal to you, you want them to establish some kind of ownership in the service that you are offering. And here, loyalty programs are one key way that you can do so, to be able to keep a customer coming back to you. And like Kwame said, once you establish these loyalty programs and you retain them, you need to be able to ensure that you do everything you can to retain their custom, including making sure that you always make provision for them and provide for their needs. We talked about high costs, and we said here that the services in this industry are relatively expensive, both for the customers and the service providers. So the service provider needs to reassure customers of the reliability of the services they are offering to keep the customers coming back, to ensure that the initial investments that they have made in terms of cost can be recouped through the custom that the tourists will bring their way. And we've already talked about the effects of seasonality and how to be able to offset them through the different seasonal prices that are charged. With regard to the ease of entry and exit, all that institutions in this sector can do is to be able to differentiate themselves and set themselves apart. So that regardless of the number of institutions or organizations that are in the sector at any period of time, you can make sure that your institution stands out from the lot and is always the preferred choice among tourists. In terms of interdependence, we talked about the fact that there needs to be some kind of collaboration and coordination, right, within and along the supply chain, because we realize that the industry has a lot of subsectors that interact and interdepend on each other to be able to guarantee value to the tourists that patronize services in the sector. We also talked about the impact on society as well as external shocks. And with regards to the impact on society, we established that sustainability is the way to go, to be able to reduce the negative impact and enhance the positive impact of the industry on the environment in the various destinations. And then for the external shocks, you should always have a contingency plan in place, at least to the extent that in the event of some unforeseen activity or occurrence, you as a manager can be able to put in place measures to ensure that you can offset the effects of some of these occurrences, even though you cannot perfectly offset these effects, like we have experienced in the era of COVID, where a lot of institutions had no choice than to close their doors because no one was allowed to come in, especially during the lockdown period. So this, in a nutshell, summarizes our discussion on the characteristics of services in the hospitality and tourism industry. Does anyone have any question or any contribution they would like to make before we proceed? Okay, then I presume everyone is okay.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Awesome. All right. So in that regard, we've talked about the effects of COVID-19 on the sector. And I believe that our strategic focus in this course is going to be to look at the after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and what it means for strategies that are going to be formulated moving forward by managers in the industry and implemented to help the recovery of their various firms and institutions from the effects of the pandemic. So we are going to watch two video cases, one on the effect of COVID-19 on the industry, and the other one on trends that are being observed in the industry post-COVID. And then we will have a discussion on them to be able to see the implications that they are likely to have moving forward for hospitality and tourism strategy. So I'm going to load the videos now. Okay. Please, can you see the video player I'm sharing? Please, can you see the video player I'm sharing?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes,
Please, can you
Many
hear the
people in the
sound?
rich world are wondering when they'll next be able to go on a foreign holiday.
Yes,
Please, are you
please.
able to hear the sound?
yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yes, Joe.
Okay, all right. So let's watch the video and then we'll have a quick discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain speaking.
Many people in the rich world are wondering when they'll next be able to go on a foreign holiday. And while the answer to that remains unclear, what's more certain is that travel in the post-pandemic world will be different. So what will the key changes look like? And what do they mean for holidaymakers, business travellers, and those working in the industry? Monday afternoon on the beach, Sonia came to the Canary Islands for a short break last year and decided to stay. The pandemic has changed how many people think about travel and its relationship with their working lives. And Sonia is one of a growing number of travellers who are now mixing business and pleasure, thanks to the growing acceptability of remote working.
Before, I was head of sales. I was basically all the time very busy. And when I first arrived, it was like for me perfect.
Sonia is combining a prolonged holiday with working from La Palma, one of the smallest Canary Islands.
We try to find the balance between working and also having a good time and enough time to breathe, travel, and see more about the nature.
According to travel firm Expedia, 3/4 of Americans would like to combine work and a holiday. And some in the travel industry think working holidays offer opportunities both now and in the future. Nacho Rodriguez runs the house Sonia is staying in and says business is booming.
We've seen a humongous increase in demand. A lot of knowledge workers that were based in Dublin, in London, they decided to relocate and visit warmer places like the Canary Islands.
Outlook is bleaker for those offering more traditional accommodations such as hotels and resorts. Tourism accounts for 40% of jobs on the islands. but the number of visitors in December was 81% lower than the year before. In the past few months, Nacho has helped hotel owners fill their empty rooms with remote workers, and even the regional government is coming to him for advice on how to get more people to the islands.
Certainly, the interest of the regional government has increased because traditional tourism weren't common. Therefore, they had the urge to understand what other alternatives they could promote.
But it remains to be seen whether the numbers of people combining work and a holiday will rise in the post-pandemic world. And for now, this is only an option open to a privileged minority. So it will take much more than an influx of digital nomads to restore visitors to pre-pandemic levels. The reason for this is that the devastation to international travel caused by COVID-19 is like nothing seen before. Prior to the pandemic, the number of international tourists had been rising fairly steadily for the past 30 years. But last year, the number of people travelling dropped to levels last seen in the 1980s. And one sector that is suffering as a result is air travel.
When we had the 9/11 terrorist attacks or the global financial crisis, we didn't see air travel fall by more than 3% in a calendar year, whereas last year it fell 66%.
No one can say when or even if flying is going to recover. The best guess from industry trade association IATA is that flights could be back at 2019 levels in the next 3 years. But the recovery could take much longer. The prospects of recovery for long-haul flights look particularly grim. This is because long-haul carriers rely on business fares to subsidise the cheap seats at the back of the plane. And the pandemic has hit corporate trips hard. According to a poll conducted in December, 89% of firms had cancelled most or all international business travel. And although this may pick up, the consensus among most analysts is that between 20 and 25% of work trips could be gone for good, which is bad news for legacy airlines.
Business travel is a really important sector, particularly the long-haul airlines, because it's really the driver of profitability. It's the driver of the financial viability of the routes.
Several long-haul carriers have already been bailed out with state aid. It's not clear what happens when the money needs to be repaid. So fares on some long-haul routes look set to rise, meaning fewer people will be able to afford exotic holidays. But the outlook for short-haul flights looks sunnier. The sector's set to make a quicker recovery. Many budget airlines are less reliant on business fares. Some, like Europe's largest airline, Ryanair, have used the pandemic to cut costs further, to keep their fares low.
We've lowered our labour costs, we've lowered our aircraft costs, we're negotiating recovery discounts with a lot of our airports. And fuel is lower. I think it's the most exciting era in my 25 or 30 years in this business.
But Michael O'Leary's predictions that planes and beaches in Europe could be busy as soon as this summer may be going too far, and have more to do with his famous salesman bravado. The company has just had to pull this advert for encouraging travellers to break COVID restrictions.
So you could jab and go.
And the emergence of new variants of the virus means travel in Europe and other parts of the world is currently getting harder, not easier, thanks to restrictions such as quarantines and border closures. The virus looks set to be a feature of life for years to come. And that makes one significant change to travel likely. You'll have to pack more than just your passport in future. Some in the industry believe travellers will have to carry proof of vaccination to leave the country. But these so-called vaccine passports are not without problems. The rate at which the world is being vaccinated varies, and some poorer countries will not get the jab for several years. meaning they could be effectively shut out of global travel.
If you start requiring vaccination or vaccines as a prerequisite to travel, we believe that that's unfair and that's going to drive discrimination. And that's going to be impacting not only in travel, but in other areas.
Another possibility is that you'll have to travel with a new app on your phone to prove your COVID status. A variety of digital health apps are currently being trialled that translate a negative COVID test into a QR code and allow travellers to prove they're COVID-free quickly and easily.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to United Airlines Flight.
And in time, they could become as central to travel as a passport.
Like London.
It should allow trust that the traveller, has been tested, and that should give governments the confidence to remove any restrictions. And I think that's a sort of critical next step for opening up markets.
In the meantime, the drop in travellers is giving the tourism industry a rare chance for a reboot. Many destinations are rethinking the type of visitors they attract and considering how to make tourism more sustainable. In Amsterdam, the city is considering a ban on non-residents buying cannabis to attract a better class of tourist. Machu Picchu in Peru is introducing new visitor limits. Barcelona has run a campaign to encourage people to venture away from the old city.
So the sustainability agenda is another one that has been accelerated, which is great. It's not only the governments, it's not only the private sector, it is also the traveler that needs to be more responsible. The traveler now needs to make sure that the impact of their trip is benefiting more the community.
Back in the Canary Islands, Nacho is also thinking along these lines by encouraging visitors to some of the less well-known islands.
Hi Sonia, how are you? How are things going?
Very well, I'm very happy. Everybody's
This is the first time he's hosted people on La Palma, and he hopes this interest in slower and more sustainable travel, rather than mass tourism and package holidays, will continue beyond the pandemic.
We have to think that the Canary Islands received almost 15 million tourists in 2019, so that's a lot of people, and that's actually in some way unsustainable. Could be considered that economic side of things. Most of those tour operators are based in the home countries, so the benefit of those people traveling to the Canaries not necessarily stays in the local community.
Getting travel back on its feet is not just about holidays. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry and the backbone of the globalized world. Building back in the right way could mean both a more seamless experience for travelers and a more sustainable future for the industry that supports them.
I'm Simon Wright, Industry Editor at The Economist. If you'd like to read my special report on
All right. Are we there?
Yes, Joyce.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So let's quickly discuss what we watched. So what is your take on what they are saying generally? What do you think is the core theme of what the whole presentation was about? Anyone who is ready can go.
I think it's about business and travel, or business and tourism.
Yeah.
Business and travel. So
yeah.
The narrator makes us look at various countries and various stakeholders. For instance, you saw the IATA boss talk about the impact and the various strategies they had come out with. The Hotel Palma also trying to tell us what they had. I heard something on cannabis where New Zealand citizens, I didn't get that, but largely what my takeaway is business and travel, the impact and the various strategies they put in place to boost revenue. Yes.
Yeah, great. Kwame, anyone else? Anyone else?
Doug,
yes,
I don't know if I got it right, but I felt low when I realized that some countries have not had their jab because they can't afford.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering, yes, and
Yeah.
if care is not taken, it means that they wouldn't be able to travel.
Good.
Because it's one of, yes. I'm just wondering, so with that, I mean, what's going to happen to them? Are other countries going to volunteer and help, or what are they going to do?
Good. So you realize that phenomenon is something that is largely beyond the control of individual firms and institutions in the sector. You realize that?
Yes, Doc.
So because of that, it is pushing tourism in the post-COVID era into a new direction. Because tourism and hospitality cannot rely on the huge influx of foreign tourists like it used to do. So with the reality of people not getting the job for the next 5-6 years, based on their estimation, and with the reality of post-COVID international tourist numbers not going back to the way they used to be, they predicted that the industry is being pushed in a particular direction. Did you realize that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what direction do you think this is in? We started strategizing. So we observe two main realities. One, the international tourist numbers are not going to go back to pre-COVID times anytime soon. And secondly, this can be largely attributed to the fact that some countries are not due to get the jab and are not prepared to get it until the next 4, 5, 6 years. Meaning that the tourism and hospitality sector has to have a redirection or a reorientation. And I'm asking, what do you think this reorientation must entail based on what we watched?
No, I just want to try.
Go ahead.
Are we now to try and take tourism to them?
No. They mentioned the concepts that I mentioned during the lecture. And they mentioned something that revolves around the impact of tourism on society.
If I may,
yes, go ahead.
How easy it will be for tourists to access a particular country with regards to entry and exit. The seasonality, for instance, they will consider season, so their plans will be geared towards a certain season. By then, I believe that tourists would have prepared themselves enough, and the host will also prepare itself enough to receive them.
Yes,
that's what I think.
But what do we do in the meantime? Remember, we talked about the issue of the high fixed costs. Those costs have to be offset in the time that we are waiting for things to adjust. So what are the options within that waiting period for these institutions in the hospitality sector and tourism sector?
I think the timeshare would come in here. So they may end up having some packages that would, let some people, like the lady in the video we watched. Right now, she's moved to another place to work, like working from home, let's say more. So she's moved from where she used to stay, and now she's gone to another country just to work. And
yeah,
it's like
but their concept is not timeshare though.
Okay.
They called it something. Who remembers what they called it? Remember they said something along the lines of a working holiday.
Yes, working holiday.
Yeah, so you're working while you're on holiday.
Yeah.
Good.
I think that's the main concept.
Yeah.
I think that's the main concept.
Yeah. So that's one of the ways that we are shifting now.
Doc.
Yes.
I also, I think I heard one of the gentlemen saying that maybe the vaccination shouldn't be one of the criteria to add to travel. I don't know if that is what he said.
Yes, but in your opinion, isn't that? Yes. Do you think that is a risky move, or it's a valid
it is
move?
a risky move. It's a risky move.
Yeah, and I don't think any particular institution would want to be held responsible for causing a super spreader incident. Yeah. By knowingly admitting people that they are unable to confirm whether they've been vaccinated or not. And I think based on the discussion too, there was a push largely towards domestic tourism. You remember that part? Did anyone hear the part about the push towards domestic tourism? No one heard that part. Okay, what about the push towards more sustainable tourism? That's the part where Kwame heard about the cannabis in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where they want to attract a certain class of tourists. Not just the tourists who want to come and buy free cannabis. Yes, Kwame, please go ahead.
If I may ask, is it because Netherlands is noted for growing or there's some level of legalization of cannabis?
Yeah.
Which is why that is being pushed.
Exactly.
Okay.
But they realized post-COVID that legalization is not helping the sector. Okay. Because it's attracting all manner of tourists.
Mm.
But right now, post-COVID, they want to attract a certain class of tourists.
Okay.
And I don't know who heard this from the video. This is a very very subliminal aspect of the video. You have to be really paying attention to be able to catch it. They were pushing for a specific kind of tourism to be encouraged now. Did anyone catch that? There was a push for ecotourism. Yeah. Did anyone catch that? The push for ecotourism.
I didn't see it as ecotourism, but I saw it more about towards sustainability consciousness.
Yes, sustainability consciousness, good. But they were also pushing for ecotourism, for people to go more for holidays that involved visiting nature. Did you hear that part?
No.
Yeah. Where two women stood side by side and more like it was a Forest Valley kind of.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Good. So that tells us something pivotal once again here, that post-COVID, prior to the full recovery, there are certain kinds of tourism that are more plausible. In this case, based on what we just watched, business tourism is out of the question. We can't count on it to come back right now. So we are being encouraged as actors in the sector to look to other forms of tourism. And in this case, ecotourism is one of them. Sustainable tourism is another. And the third one is what? Domestic tourism. because we will no longer have the huge influx of people from international destinations. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, please.
And we got all that from that small 10-minute video. So strategizing is hard work, ladies and gentlemen. Because all these individual variables, these subliminal variables, these little contextual issues have to be taken into consideration. Are we okay?
Yes, please.
Good.
Okay.
So based on that, let's watch this short video. I think it's 1.5 minutes on the trends in travel post-COVID. So they are listing some trends, and let's see how many of the trends we will see in there that have been highlighted in the discussion that we just had. So I'm going to share the player again. And this video is by Euromonitor International. They are an international market research organization that does research on various concepts. So let's quickly watch the video and then we'll come back and have a quick discussion. All right.
Travel and tourism witnessed an unprecedented collapse this year due to COVID-19. Some industry sectors are expected to rebound quicker than others, but uncertainty and risks remain high. In Europe, recovery is expected to take a minimum of 4 years to reach pre-crisis levels. The staycation is making a comeback as consumers emerge from lockdown to visit friends and family. In the future, sustainable, nature-based travel, such as camping, trekking, and wild swimming, will become more popular. The Americas were devastated by the pandemic, with some countries in Latin America the last to leave lockdown. Business travel was decimated, and hopes now rest with domestic leisure travel. Moving forward, consumers will value safe, seamless, and, most importantly, authentic travel experiences. Asia Pacific should recover faster than other regions, with tourism expected to return to normal levels in 3 years. Growth will be spurred on by value-for-money products such as short-term rentals and low-cost carriers, the main challenge being how to manage growth in a sustainable way. Historically low oil prices added to the economic impact of the pandemic in the Middle East and Africa. Wildlife tourism and luxury travel were catastrophically hit, and hotel chains are pulling out of some African countries altogether. However, over the next 3 to 4 years, online and mobile travel sales have the brightest outlook for recovery.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your...
All right, so how many of the trends match what we observed from the video we watched prior to this one? This is like a revision. How many of the trends match? And which ones were new? Gloria, which of the trends from our discussion matches what we just saw? Gloria, are you there? Okay, is that Jemima?
Yeah.
With the name Jamie, yeah. So Jemima, which of the trends matches the concepts we identified from the video we watched prior to that one?
I think the decline in business travel.
The what?
The decline in business
The network
travel.
is not stable, so I can't hear what
Oh,
actually
okay,
you
sorry,
are saying.
Gloria. Yeah, Jemima is telling us. Okay, so Jemima, you said the decline in business travel.
Yes, please.
Exactly, that's a key one. Great, which other ones? Anyone can come in. Mercedes, are you there? Ruth, are you there?
Yes, please. Domestic leisure travel.
Yeah, domestic leisure travel, which is another key one. Any other one? Any other one? Ruth?
No, please, I'm here.
There's one more. The decline in business travel, domestic leisure travel, and there's a third one that we identified in our discussion. You remember? It starts with the letter S. Who remembers?
Doc, is it sustainable?
Good, sustainable tourism.
Doc, is it sustainable?
Yes, sustainable tourism. That is what it was. And then there was a fourth one we didn't discuss, but they mentioned. And I think we mentioned it when we were discussing the interdependent parts of the tourism sector. But it's one of the trends. Pardon?
Ecotourism.
Yes, ecotourism was in there as well, under the domestic leisure tourism. But they mentioned the fourth one.
Okay, Doc, please give us the first letter.
It starts with O. It starts with O. It starts with O. O-N. L.
Online sales.
Online travel sales. Remember we talked about something regarding price comparison sites, you remember?
Yes.
Where people can book various elements of hospitality and tourism services, from accommodation to transport to food and all that. So they added another trend, which is online. So these are the key things we need to be thinking about. If these are the trends and we are strategizing as managers in this sector, we need to ask ourselves, what are the implications of these trends on our overall strategy? How can we strategize to be able to ensure that we are taking advantage of these trends to boost our business, given that sales and business in the hospitality and tourism sector is not going to go back to pre-COVID times until the next 4 to 5 years time, right? So generally, those are the questions we would try to answer in this class by learning the various tools and techniques that we can use to be able to take advantage of these trends and strategize accordingly to ensure that our businesses do not sink. Given that we heard from the video case we watched, several organizations have actually pulled out of certain countries and regions altogether because of the effects and the impact of COVID-19 on their business, right? So with that, we've come to the end of our session for today. I believe it was a fruitful session.
Yes, please.